guest, Joe Danneman, joins us. The MLB Playoffs start tomorrow and a packed slate of football this weekend. Stay tuned for more. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the NKU Sports Talk Radio Show. I'm Josh Kalb, joined by Noah Miller and Bryan Bauer, and we are glad you could join us. We are glad to have Fox 19 Sports Director Joe Danneman on with us today. Joe, thanks for coming in.
Guys, I'm impressed with the setup in here. You guys should be proud of yourselves, and I'm honored to be here to talk about sports and my career with you guys.
We appreciate it. We're just going to start right in. And Joe, if you could just start by telling a little about yourself, maybe where you're from, what you do.
Sure. So I'm from here, and so I have the unique opportunity to work in my hometown, which has its many positives, a couple of negatives working in your hometown, because some people are like, hey, but isn't that a Covcath guy? And they think there's some bias that comes with that sometimes, so I try to stay away from that. But yeah, I'm from here, went to Covington Catholic, went away for college to Syracuse, and then started at Fox 19 right out of college and have worked there for 19 of my 21 years in the business. There was a 2-year period where I left Cincinnati to work in Evansville, Indiana for my first sports anchoring job because there weren't any jobs here in town for a sports anchor, so I left, came back, but I've been here for almost 20 years working in Cincinnati. And for me as a kid, that was a dream. So I'm literally working my dream job when I wanted as a kid to do sports in my hometown, and I get to do it on a daily basis.
And so going to a question for your career now, growing up, you were around the Bengals, the Reds. So what is it like now to cover those teams?
It's different because I grew up as a fan of those teams, and you have to turn that off. And I think that naturally happens. People are like, how do you turn that off? How does that happen? I think it just naturally happens if you're a professional. You check that at the door. There's the old saying, there's no cheering in the press box. That's a real thing. That's something that I take pride in. In fact, when we covered the Super Bowl, everybody was like, you should wear orange, you should do this. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to cross that line because I am a professional and I take that seriously. But that's been the biggest change for me is when I was a kid. I was a kid from the 90s. Back then, cheering for the Bengals, people were like, you like the Bengals? Every single year it was 2 wins, 3 wins, 4 wins. And now, my kids are growing up in this era of Joe Burrow and going to Super Bowls, and so everybody's a big Bengals fan. But no, it's been something that's been a lot of fun, and I think it's important for my job is understanding I have that almost institutional knowledge of the teams I cover because it's been my life. I've experienced it. So when something big happens for the Bengals or the Reds, I have instant context because I grew up with it. So the Reds losing 100 games, yeah, I know that's the second time they've ever done that. I could look that up in a stat, but a lot of times when you're on TV or you're doing this job, you have to know it instantaneously and put that into context. I understand it because I lived it. I was from the 80s, so I know in 1982 was the last time they had lost 100 games. So that institutional knowledge I have of being from this area and working in this area, I think is an advantage for me. So it's been a lot of fun to kind of put all my years of being an obsessed local sports fan into work now as a local TV sports anchor because I think that kind of gives me a leg up. Not necessarily on the competition, but I feel comfortable talking about these teams and the history of these teams. And I always have context because I lived it here in Cincinnati.
And so obviously you said you wanted to always work in sports, but is there a certain area of news or media that you would want to work in if it wasn't sports?
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer because I was about to say if there was one thing I could do in this business that I don't do, I'd love to be a play-by-play guy. Okay? I think anybody at their core just loves to be in the arena and to be part of the actual game broadcast and be part of the show. So that to me, if I could transition anything in my career and try that and do that, I would love to do that. But outside of sports, I don't know if there's anything in this business that I would do outside of sports. I actually did 9 months as a stint as a news reporter. When the recession hit back in 2009, a lot of TV stations, including mine, started cutting back on staff. So they started cutting into the sports department. We used to have 4 people in our sports department. They cut it down to 2, and I was one of the people who got lobbed off. But they wanted to keep me because they liked my work, and they knew I was a reliable worker. And so they said, why don't you transition into news reporting? And I said, okay, I'll do that. But at the same time, I'm going to let you know I'm going to keep looking for sports jobs, even if it takes me out of town here. I had to keep a job. I just had my first child with my wife. So we have a newborn at home, and this is the real world hitting you right in the face. Like, man, you don't have a job unless you take this job. So I did it, and I went and did news reporting for 9 months and absolutely hated it. Hated it. I had to go knock on doors of people who lost loved ones. I had to do murder investigations, that kind of thing, like real hard news. It was tough, and I wasn't good at it, and I hated not being good at my job. It really bothered me to my core. So for 9 months, I did that, toughed it through, and then that's when I transitioned to Evansville and worked as a sports anchor there to maintain my sports career going forward. But yeah, I can't think of anything in this business that I would do outside of sports. If I had to, just to get a paycheck and maintain a job, I would probably work in news producing. I would not want to be boots on the ground news reporting out there doing anything like that. That's just not for me. That's not my personality. I don't think I would handle it well. I don't think I would do the job well. And that's somebody that has to do that job well if they're out there telling important news stories. And I don't think that would be me.
Yeah, you mentioned you had a family and you have children. What does kind of your morning routine look like?
It's different. It's very unique. So my kids have to be off to school by 6:30 in the morning. So I get up and help get them ready. And they're older now. I have a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and the 8-year-old. He still needs a little help to make sure everything gets taken care of and all of his books are away and his shirt's tucked in. And once I get him off to school, I try to go back to sleep because my schedule is usually early afternoon till about midnight. And people are always like, what's your schedule? I would say it's on average 2 to 12, something like that. But there are days where on Tuesdays, Luke Fickell has his media availability at noon. On Wednesdays, the Bengals have their media availability at 11. So a lot of times my days are broken up where I do a couple hours in the morning and then go home, grab something to eat, get ready, and go back in. But my general routine is try to get back to sleep after the kids go off to school and then do everything that normal people do at night, where they get a run in or a workout in or get their whatever errands they've got to run. I do those before I go to work. Because people do those when they get home from work. I do those before. So that's what my typical morning looks like. Sometimes it's sending emails or sending text messages to set up stories for the day. You know, if I'm trying to do a high school feature, I'll contact a local coach and ask what their schedule looks like for that day. So I kind of have a plan on what I'm doing. But, this time of year, my days are so set and there's so much time taken up by the Bengals. They have availability on Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. So when the team is as good as the Bengals are, you have to give them the most of your attention. And then you also mix in some UC stuff. And look, that's a team who made the college football playoff last year. So my schedule's kind of booked up during football season. So anytime in the morning I can get to myself. My wife works, so I'm home alone. And that's my time to knock out all the different errands and the different lifestyle things that you got to do just to maintain being a human being.
Yeah, you also mentioned that you did like some actual like hardcore news. So, and obviously you want to do sports. You've always wanted to do sports. So what's something that you kind of consider like a failure, but you like learn something from it?
And you'll see this happen a lot to news folks where they have a story that they're pursuing and people just don't want you to do the story. Okay, so I'm trying to think of an example from myself that nothing's coming to mind, but there are times when something really important or controversial happens and people just don't want to talk about it. You pursue it all day long. You work on, you make calls, you send messages, and people just don't want to go on TV and talk about this. And so you don't have, come showtime, you don't have anything. You don't have a story. And so that to me felt like a failure of a day. And that happened a couple of times working in news. And that still happens sometimes in sports where you want to pursue a story, you want to do a story. It's a great story. Look, I would love to interview Phil Castellini after the Reds lost 100 games. And he said what he said at the start of the year, but that's something Phil Castellini right now is not interested in doing. Even though I've sent messages to the Reds asking them, would Phil like to go on camera, do an interview about this? Like, what are you going to talk about? I'm like, well, we're going to have to approach the subject. In fact, at the Field of Dreams game, here's an example. They offered us to bring down Phil Castellini because I was there covering the game. The game was on Fox. To bring down Phil Castellini for an on-field interview, and I had like a 2-minute segment. And I said, we can't do this with Phil. And they're like, why can't you do it with Phil? I'm like, I can't put him on TV and not approach the subject level that people want me to ask him about. I'll be doing the viewers a disservice. I'll be doing my own career a disservice by going on there and asking Phil about what a cool experience this is out in the corn. How cool of an event is this for the team? And not approach the subject that we got to talk about. There's not enough time there in that 2-minute live hit to do what we have to do with Phil Castellini. And I don't think it's fair to him to bring him on to pretense if we're going to talk about Field of Dreams and then bombard him with questions about what he said before the year. So I do think that there are times in this business that you want a story, you try to go after a story, and the story just doesn't manifest itself. And I think to us, it feels like a failure, but I don't think anybody at home knows. Nobody at home knows that you pursued that story and it didn't work out. So a lot of times, too, there'll be times during a show when things don't air right, the wrong tape runs, the wrong graphic pops up on TV, and people at home don't even realize it, and you kind of roll with it, and you don't point out the mistake. You just kind of keep going with it, and people don't even realize the mistake happened unless you point it out to them. So I think that's important, too, to learn. So it's a great question and a hard question for me to answer because a lot of times the failures that do happen in our business, nobody knows they're failures unless you tell them it's a failure. And so that's why you kind of do what you can to kind of mask any mistakes you make by just going on and just keep going. And because they're going to happen. Because as much as we move towards technology in this business, it still takes human beings to make that technology work. And no one's perfect.
Yeah, that's a great point because you know that mistake and you might feel bad about the mistake, but us at home, we don't realize that mistake. We think it's almost perfect.
Yeah.
So,
and a lot of times, too, when you go into something and you do mess up, but if you say it confidently, no one knows it's a mess up. Like if I went out there and I said a certain player scored a touchdown and I had the wrong name, and that happens when you do high school shows because these aren't superstars like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Joey Votto. We don't know all the stars at Bishop Brossard High School or all the stars at Highlands High School. We may know some of the players, but if a kid scores a touchdown and we just had that edited and I run onto the set and have to do this game and I get the wrong name, I feel terrible doing it. But if I say it with confidence, 99.9% of our audience will have no idea I messed up.
Oh, you're
except for that kid
right.
and his family.
Yeah.
And I'll get an email about it. That'll happen. And they should email me about it. I was wrong. Let me change it. Let me fix it so I can put it on social, put it on our website as corrected because I do have the opportunity to go ahead and correct those things. But yeah, if you just power through anything with confidence, there's something people always say in this business, and I'll give you a tangible example of this. When I was working the Kentucky Derby, when I was really young, I was in my mid-20s, and we had these passes, and I don't know where these passes actually got us. But if you walk around like you look like you know what you're doing, know where you're going, no one's going to stop you, right? So we literally walked down onto the actual track 5 minutes before the race. I'm standing there in the dirt with this pass. I don't know if this pass gets me where I'm supposed to be. And I shoot a quick stand-up, and some guy comes down there and goes, "You're not supposed to be here." I'm like, "We got to shoot this one thing." He goes, "You better get it right on the first take." And that's the great thing, too, about it, man. And you're going to realize in this business, once you do get out there and you start doing things like that, when the pressure's on, like when it has to be done right, there's something about the human body and the human brain that kicks it in. You do it right. You do your best. Because a lot of times guys will shoot stand-ups and it'll be for tape. And when I shoot a stand-up, even though I've been doing this for 20 years, it'll still take me like 5 takes to get it right. When I do it live, I get it right the first time. Because the pressure's on, you have to do it right. You know in your mind you got to do it. Even if you mess up, you got to power right through it. And so for that example, if you just act like you know where you're going, you know what you're doing, people will believe you. You seem believable. Yeah, if you're confident about what you're doing, people will believe it.
Yeah, so you cover a bunch of sports, especially local sports. But which sport is your favorite to watch as a fan, but which is your favorite to report on?
Okay, that's a great question because there are two different answers. I'm a basketball person by nature. Love college basketball. I love the atmosphere. I think what really drew me into this business is being part of the atmospheres. I found that intoxicating as a kid. I knew I wasn't going to. I mean, look at me. I'm 5'10", 5'11", 160 pounds. I was never going to make it in any kind of professional sport. And I think a lot of people who get into this business have the same love for sports, but just weren't born with the genetics to do this as a profession, actually on the court, on the field. Doesn't mean we love sports any less than anybody else. So I'm a basketball person by nature, and I love basketball. I love being in the atmosphere. I just wanted to be in it in any way possible, and I thought this was the avenue to do it. So basketball is the number one love, and it might be 1A to what I love to cover, but right now I love covering the NFL for two reasons. The first reason is the Bengals are exciting. The Bengals are fun. Every Sunday with the Bengals feels like, what's going to happen today? Every game feels like it comes down to some final 2 minutes of mayhem with the Bengals. You never know what's going to happen. And two, there's so much interest, right? Anything that happens with the Bengals right now, people care about. Joe Burrow said the week of the white helmet game, I asked him about it, and he said, I don't care, man. I play in trash bags. Yeah. I put that on Twitter, 3,000 likes, right? Anything Joe Burrow does, people care about. So when you have that, this I hope, 10-year window right now with Joe Burrow and this core of Bengals players, this is lightning in a bottle for Cincinnati. And it's so good for business, for what we do. People care. And when people care about what you talk about and what you report on, that to me is rewarding. So right now, NFL has to be number one, Bengals, because I'm not necessarily a huge football fan. I love football's fun. I like football just as much as anybody else. But when people care about what I'm talking about and reporting on, I think that to me resonates with me, and that's why right now I like covering the Bengals, probably more than anything else. I will say the most rewarding thing I do in this job is storytelling. That's my favorite part, is finding, and it could be anything. It could be a high school kid, it could be a college kid, it could be a professional athlete, people that have amazing stories. When you tell that story and you do it right, and you know you do it right, and it plays well and people react to it, that to me is the most rewarding part of the job. But just the idea of covering a certain sport right now with the interest in the Bengals, that to me is the most rewarding.
Okay, so let's keep it with the Bengals. And so say you're an NFL coach, and these are your three receivers. Who would you start, bench, and cut out of these three?
I knew this was coming, only because this is something that's talked about a lot. Because I know your generation, your age, you love it's what, start, cut, and bench?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so Jamar Chase.
Okay, so I think the easy one to cut is I love Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd's one of my favorite people to answer.
It's not even about these three receivers. It's not about the current three. It's Jamar Chase, Chad Ochocinco, and A.J. Green.
Okay, so Tyler, take it all back. Tyler, if somehow you're watching, I love you, Tyler. You're the best. Okay, so it's Jamar, Chad, and A.J. Jamar, Chad, and A.J. I'm starting Chad. I think Chad is the best receiver in Bengals history. And I think Chad's one of the most important players in Bengals history. And I think that, too, matters because Chad ushered in this idea of the 90s just desert land of Bengals football that is just forgotten. There's nothing there that's of consequence. Chad made the Bengals cool. Chad made the Bengals a national brand. Jamar Chase is a fantastic football player, but Jamar doesn't move the needle like Joe Burrow does. Jamar doesn't move the needle like Chad Ochocinco did.
Yeah, and you still see Chad kind of do that after he's done playing. Like,
correct.
He's heavily involved.
He's a brand.
He's a huge
right?
ambassador. He kept people interested.
Great word.
And he comes up to the games. He's so fun to watch just in general, too.
Ambassador is a great word. He is a Bengals ambassador still, without even trying. So I'm starting Chad because Chad is the number one most important wide receiver in team history. So bench is Jamar Chase. He stays on the team just in case Chad goes down. Okay, I'm going to bench Jamar, and I'm going to cut A.J. Green. Absolute true professional. One of my most favorite Bengals of all time, A.J. Green. Guy was a true professional, knew when he made a mistake, would always talk about it, was always available. Great dude, true pro, phenomenal football player. But Jamar is a little bit of Chad personality, the gritty kind of thing, and a lot of the AJ production. And I like where Jamar's career might take him. So I go, and I think this would probably be, there might be some younger people who say start Jamar just because the huge rookie season, rookie of the year, that kind of thing, Super Bowl. I'm going Chad start, Jamar bench, cut AJ.
I mean, even with Chad, he would even tell some of the guys his routes and still catch the ball. Like, he was just phenomenal.
Phenomenal personality and a great player, and I think sometimes misunderstood. He's one of the hardest workers I've ever seen. For the Cincinnati Bengals. And I'm at every training camp practice, and I watched this guy. He truly wanted to be great and wanted to do the work to be great. Had some moments, did some stupid stuff. The halftime blow-up of the playoff game, that was much talked about. That happened. But, yeah, Chad, as the talent, the personality, the work ethic, he was the entire package. And doing what I do, I mean, come on. He is top three, if not one of one when it comes to local TV interview targets. I have so many stories about Chad, including one time when I accidentally almost tried to cash one of his paychecks. That really happened. That really hit. And the banker was like, "Man, what? You're not Chad Johnson." Oh my gosh, wrong paycheck. Yeah, that happened. So yeah, Chad's number one for me.
And I'll kind of go away from the Bengals for a second. We might go back there, but compared to when you first started in this business, compared to now, how has media and news changed right in front of your eyes?
You guys probably have in your pockets your cell phones. That's where everything has changed. Everything is immediate now. When I started in this business, so I started just a few months before 9/11 happened. I was in the building when 9/11 happened. That was my first big news event when I was working in the building. And when that happened, that's different because it became a national story instantly. But back in 2001, when I started in this business, let's just say an example, a hypothetical, that David Bell gets fired, Reds manager gets fired. If that happened in 2001 at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a lot of people didn't know that happened until they put on the 5 o'clock news, right? Because it wasn't news.
Yeah.
It wasn't news until news time happened and told us so. Now it happens even before the team can release the information.
Yeah.
National reporters will have sources and people tell them that this happens, and it goes on Twitter, and then it's everywhere. It's
sometimes that's how they find out.
That's
too.
how they find out.
Yeah.
The actual person finds out. You're right, Josh. And so it's funny that that's where the business has changed so much, is when something like this happens, something hypothetical like that happens. I'm not trying to speak David Bell's firing into existence. His hands are handcuffed with what's going on down at Great American Ballpark. But I immediately have to go to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, our website. Sometimes we go up on a Facebook Live and do all these things. And then I worry about the TV side of things. That's where the business has changed. It's good and bad in some ways. The good thing is information is disseminated quickly, and everybody knows about it, and you're able to get that information out there. When Marvin Lewis was fired or was told he's not coming back, I actually had a source on the coaching staff who told me that before anybody else, and I reported it on Twitter. And at like 9:04 in the morning, and for like 3 minutes, no one else in the world, Adam Schefter included, was reporting this. And I remember sitting in my kitchen, my wife was like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like,
what do you do?
I'm like, boy, I hope this is right.
Oh.
But I had two sources. I had two sources on the coaching staff. They gave it to me, and I knew it was right, and so I went with it. And I'm like, I would really like someone else, like Adam Schefter, to go with this as well. So because I had an assistant news director calling, like, no one else is reporting this, and you're reporting this. I'm like, it's good, it's solid, I know it. You've known me. I've been in this business for 15 years. Why would you question me on this? And then 5 minutes later, everybody was out there with it. But if that happened in 2001 at 9 in the morning, we don't go on the air until our noon shows. Everybody else is going to have it, right? So everybody else is going to have the same story at noon, and no one's going to really have the credit for being first or breaking that story. That's probably the biggest news that I've broken since I've been in the business, and which has become harder and harder because there's so many people who are now connected, especially to the Bengals, the Reds. There are people who are on the beat daily, and it's not my daily beat. I do a million different things a day: high school, college, professional. There are guys who are signed just to do that job, and so they have better connections and hear things before I do often. So that's been the revolutionary part of our business, is just how information is passed along at such a different pace and different competition level now than it ever was 20 years ago. And there are, like everything, there are positives and negatives to that. And the positive being, for the consumer, you get information quickly. The negative being that for us, we have to figure out, well, if they got that information, why do I have to watch the news? I've already have the information. So we have to give them something on the TV side that they're not getting on the social side.
So with the news, then you would almost call it more of like a recap show than just like straight up news, because you're just kind of relaying information some people might know, maybe even straighten out the information if it's not like 100% correct.
That's almost a dirty word in the news business, the recap thing. Yeah, you can't use that. So you got to find a way to tell the story in a way that feels like it's urgent. You still have to bring some urgency to this, something different, something new, to make sure it feels like I'm getting something here that I'm not getting on social, whether it's an interview, whether it's a certain part of the story, whether it's a different angle to the story. I can't just go on there and talk about something that happened 9 hours ago. 9 hours ago in our business now might as well be 3 weeks ago. So you got to tell them something and present it in a way that makes them feel like their time was worth you coming here. Like, I saw this. I can read about this on Cincinnati.com, or I can read it on your website. I can read it on ESPN.com. Why am I coming to watch this show? How can you present this to me in a way that I'm getting information that I don't already have? So that's the challenge. That's the negative. It makes our job harder because not only is it taking up time and I have to feel like I'm on call 24/7 if something happens at 9 in the morning, I have to report on it immediately right there and then go about my normal day and try to get things done that I need to be just a normal human being. But also at the same time, I'm also thinking in my head, okay, I also have to think about a way to creatively present this on TV that it doesn't feel like I'm just recapping something that they knew 9 hours ago.
And do you have a favorite story that you've done out of all the years that you've been
I have
in
a
the
couple. When people ask me that question, there are two that pop into mind. One won several awards, one didn't. And I know the reason it didn't because I think I was like 27 or 28 at the time, and I wasn't as good as I am now. You know,
Yeah.
I think anybody in this business will tell you the more they do it, the better they get at it. And right now, me being in the business for 20 years and still hungry and still motivated, I feel like I'm at the peak of what I am and going to be as a storyteller. So I'll give you two. The first one that won a lot of awards, this was an amazing story. And it's amazing how these things come about. It's just word of mouth. Hey, I was at a cross-country meet, and there's this girl who has Down syndrome, and one of her teammates runs with her. Kind of thing. I'm like, that's an amazing story. Let me go do that story. So it was at Campbell County High School, and this girl, she comes from a family of great athletes who are runners, and she has Down syndrome, and she wanted to be involved somehow, some way in high school sports, and the family wanted her to have something, right? And not just fit in, but be a part of something. So they approached the coach and said, can she be a part of the cross-country team? And they said, sure. However, we do have some reservations about this because, you know, with Down syndrome, she's likely going to finish last.
Yeah.
And she's going to need help getting around the course. So the coach of the cross-country team asked the team and said, is there anybody who volunteers, anybody who's on the team who doesn't feel like they're going to be super competitive in races who would run with her and help her? And there was a senior on the team who was going out for cross-country. She was more of a track runner, but she wanted to be on the team. And she's like, I'll volunteer to do this. And so they ran every race together. And they would finish, and the girl would let the Down syndrome teammate finish ahead of her every race. So she would finish last, and the girl with Down syndrome would finish second last. But they ran together every race, and they would get standing ovations, and it was amazing. And I did that story, and it was such a cool story. It was such a cool story because here comes the pack, and then there's these two by themselves. You know, it was the human spirit running together. So that one to me always stands out. That won a lot of awards. The other one that I loved, but I was 27, 28 years old and didn't do an awesome job with it. I think I could do a much better job with it now. And it's a very sad story. It was a young man in high school here in northern Kentucky, and he and his sister were home. His parents were out of town on a vacation. This was winter time. And he was in high school. She was in college. She got into a car accident and was killed in the accident. Parents were out of town. They were notified. They were flying home. And this kid's a high school kid. He's on the basketball team, a JV player. And didn't know what to do with himself. He's obviously an emotional wreck. Mom and dad are on the way home. What do I do? He said, the only thing I could think to do was just go to the basketball game and be around my teammates. JV kid, JV player. They decided to throw him in the varsity game just to give him something to do, get his mind off it. Game of his life. Hits like 9 threes in the first half. Can't miss.
Wow.
Says he can feel his sister's presence. I get goosebumps still talking about it. Scored 30 points. And right as he's walking off the floor, you know, you can see he's overcome with emotion. You know, they do they subbed in so he could have that big moment. And that's right when his parents walk into the gym because his parents just got back into town and they went straight to the gym to find him because you got to take care
awesome.
of him.
Those kind of stories.
Yeah, and they hug right there on the court, and it was amazing. It was such an incredible story.
Yeah.
And those happen once or twice in a career. You get a story like that, and you have to do it right. You have to tell that person's story right. And you feel such a responsibility to do their story, right? For this person to open up to you. It was really hard to get this young man to open up.
Yeah.
He's a high school kid, man, and talking about some really hard things, and it kind of felt embarrassed by the moment a little bit too. So you feel a responsibility to do it right, and when you do it right, you feel really rewarded by those kind of things.
We have just under 30 seconds left in this segment. I'd like to thank you for coming in and joining us. We really do appreciate it. And I know the guys loved it as well.
Oh, yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, it was the best.
Great setup, guys. I'm really impressed. You should be proud of what you're doing. It's a really cool thing.
So this wraps up this segment. Stay tuned for the next. This is the NKU Sports Talk Radio Show.
First, can you see this? And this. And this. But nothing beats the moment you see that.
Cool!
That's your child's eyes opening up to a world of possibilities.
I didn't know it could do that!
Because one trip to the forest can spark a world of difference.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org. Learn about forests near you and discover cool things to do when you go, like hiking, canoeing, fishing, or camping. Or create your own adventure with family and friends, and you might just see this. Your moment's out there. Find it at discovertheforest.org. That's discovertheforest.org.
Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
No word in the English language is less convincing than probably.
Are you sure we should get matching tattoos on our first date?
Sure. We'll probably stay together.
Probably? It's been 23 minutes since I ate. I can probably swim.
You should wait 30 minutes.
Okay, now tell me what to do. Cannonball! Cramp! Oh, I have a cramp.
I can probably hit the green from here.
Probably.
Can I get a mulligan?
Ready to go?
Hey, are you sure you're okay to drive?
Yeah, I'm pretty sober. Yeah, I'm probably okay.
Probably okay isn't okay, especially when it comes to drinking and driving. If you're drinking, call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Listen and imagine. It takes 5 seconds to send a text, and for those 5 seconds, you're driving blind. Life is worth more than a text. Stay alive. Don't text and drive.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, Noise, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back, everyone, to the NKU Sports Talk Radio Show. We just had a great segment with Joe Danneman. He's going to stay on with us for the next half an hour. But for this one, we're going to talk about the MLB playoffs coming up tomorrow. Noah, you're kind of our MLB guy, so you want to start with that?
Yeah, so the playoff starts tomorrow, and it's actually the new playoff format. So the wild card used to be 1 game, and now it's a 3-game series. And the Astros, they have a bye. Yankees, they have a bye. But the Cleveland Guardians, and the Tampa Bay Rays, they face each other. Both pitchers' first names are going to be Shane. Shane McClanahan takes on Shane Bieber. And the last time these two played, Cleveland did win the series 2-1. And then the Blue Jays take on the Mariners. Luis Castillo, who's a former Red, is taking on Alek Manoah, Manoah had a fantastic season for the Blue Jays. And he's up for a Cy Young. I don't know if he's going to get it because I think Justin Verlander is going to get it for the American League. But Alek Manoah had an amazing season, and because Luis Castillo, as a former Red, he did split the season between the Reds starts and the Mariners starts, but he has an 8-6 record of a 2.99 ERA with a WHIP of 1.08. And his WHIP actually is better than his ERA. Usually that's how it is, but it's just when players are on scoring position, Luis Castillo just comes up clutch, as a lot of us saw for the Reds. He just didn't really allow that many runs or hits. It was usually strikeouts, and then the times he did get roughed up, it was really bad. Alek Manoah, he's 16-7 record with a 2.24 ERA, and his WHIP is just 0.01 sub of 1, so it's a 0.99. Now to the National League, the Dodgers, they have a bye. The Braves, they have a bye, which that wasn't decided until a couple days ago. And so the Cardinals, who are the 3 seed, take on the Phillies, the 6 seed. Zach Wheeler will take on, nobody knows yet because the Cardinals haven't posted who's going to be their Game 1 starter. Wheeler is 12-7 for the Phillies. He has a 2.82 ERA with a 1.04 WHIP. Opponent's batting average against him is a 2.21. And I don't really know who's going to be starting for the Cardinals, but if I had to guess, it'd be Jose Quintana. He has a 6-7 record, a 2.93 ERA with a WHIP of 1.2, and it's also his lowest ERA of his entire career. Which the Cardinals, they have a ton of pitching. Adam Wainwright, Jack Flannery, they have a ton of studs that can throw the ball, and that's going to actually be a really good matchup between the Phillies and Cardinals. And then probably the one I'm most excited for is the Mets and Padres, just because the Mets, they thought they had the division on lock with the Braves. They thought it was going to be an easy win, but the Braves, they came from behind. They were down. They were in second place most of the season, and then right at the last second, that's October baseball, they came up and they took the lead, and that's why the Braves got the bye in the first round. But the Mets and Padres, for the Padres, Yu Darvish is taking the mound, and then against the Mets is Max Scherzer, and Max is he's an animal when he pitches. He's kind of crazy at times, especially in playoffs. He's an amazing pitcher. Darvish is 16-8 with a 3.10 ERA and a WHIP of 0.95. And Scherzer, he's 11-5 with a 2.29 ERA and a WHIP of 0.91. So these pitchers are kind of almost identical, but Scherzer is just absolute crazy. I mean, he's pitched with a black eye. He's like, don't take me out of the game. When he first got onto the Dodgers, like everybody it's baseball, so they were like, good game, and they smack him on the butt. He was like, don't touch me. Like when he starts, you don't mess with him.
Kind of like the Mamba mentality.
Yeah, he's a crazy player. But yeah, there's a ton of games, good games too, and these are all played on Friday. The series starts on Friday. I believe it starts with the Cardinals and Phillies. Could be wrong, but I know the Mets and Padres game is at 7 or 8 o'clock Friday night.
Real quick, I know we don't know MLB. I don't know about Joe, but as much as you. Real quick, I want to go through everyone's picks. We have about 30 seconds, so real quick, everyone's picks.
So I have the Cardinals winning game 1.
Cardinals.
I picked the Cardinals too. They always find a way to win games and sneak in, and they're always kind of good.
Cardinals, it's October, period.
Yeah.
There we go. So, and I will go with the safe bet. I'm going with the Dodgers. And that will wrap up this segment. Football fans, get ready as we talk about some college football next. This is the NKU Sports Talk Radio Show.
I let my mistakes kind of take over my life. I was 0.5 credits away from completing high school, and I didn't do it.
10 years later, at age 28, Jackie finished her high school diploma.
When I found out that I was pregnant, I know that I had to do something for myself if I wanted to make her a better person and provide a better life for her. My family never stopped pushing for me to be better because they knew what I could become and who I could become as a person. My support team is amazing. The educational director, my sister, and even my 7-year-old daughter has just been more than the support that I could ask for. I've been given an opportunity, and I'm just thankful for it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
We are back. You're listening to the NKU Sports Talk Radio Show, and you know we couldn't skip over college football today. College football has been so exciting this season, and we'll get right into it in a ranked matchup between number 17 TCU at number 19 Kansas. Joe, you mentioned during the break that who would have ever thought that we would have said it's an exciting game.
A top 20 matchup of Kansas and TCU. That's where College Game Day is, right? So there's a lot of excitement about this game. I like it because college football a lot of times seems to be dominated by the same 5 or 6 teams cycling through year in, year out. To have some new blood, Kansas and TCU, I think it's exciting for the sport.
It is. And TCU's coming off that huge win over Oklahoma, so they've already kind of got that big powerhouse win under their belt. And Kansas has shocked everyone since they've got their new coach in the last few years.
Yeah, well, Kansas, like Joe was saying, football is better when like these bad teams are winning or just in general. And Kansas too is actually looking really strong. They have a good quarterback. I actually thought like one of their best quarterbacks. They were able to finally get the players and the culture they wanted. They had Les Miles, who, won at LSU, but for whatever reason, that fell apart. I mean, their coach is also, their other jobs like Nebraska are looking at them, and it's going to be fun. TCU is a high offensive powerhouse as well. They have SMU's former coach, and he knows how to beat TCU because he actually beat TCU at SMU.
Let's head across the river to Cincinnati as South Florida visits the number 24 ranked Bearcats, back in the top 25 for the first time since the preseason.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy they're back in the rankings. Personally, I think they probably should have been there a little earlier. I mean, their only loss was to Arkansas, who was ranked top 10 by like a touchdown. They're playing South Florida, who I think last game just got their first offensive pass touchdown. They're a really run-heavy team. They have a former Big 12 quarterback, but that defense and that offense, they seem to struggle. They got destroyed in their last game, but they did look good against Florida. But I think Florida and South Florida, they both looked pedestrian. Their coach has been there for years, and they still don't really have a scheme. I think this is just going to be another big rout. It's another sold-out crowd at Nippert Stadium, and Nippert Stadium's always loud. We saw that with Indiana. They had multiple false starts. I think this is a simple, fun game to watch.
UC has a 29-game home winning streak. They have 17 consecutive wins in conference. South Florida is the worst team in the conference. When people say, oh, it's the homecoming opponent. They're literally the homecoming opponent. UC pushes it to 30 games at home straight at Nippert Stadium. Second longest win streak in the country behind Clemson. UC big in this one.
Nippert Stadium is a great atmosphere, and right now they have one of the top defenders in the nation. Ivan Pace has just been a monster this year.
He's unbelievable. Where did this come from? Because he played in the MAC, and he was the lesser recruited of the two Pace brothers. They both played locally at Coleraine High School. Deshaun Pace was a big-time recruit. He's a good player in their secondary. But Ivan was one of those tweeners where he's a smallish guy but also a thicker guy. He's too small to play defensive line. Maybe he's not fast enough to play linebacker. All this kid does is make plays. And now people are saying he might be UC's top draft pick next year because he's playing as well as any linebacker in the entire country if you look at the raw numbers.
Yeah, if you look at the stats, his stats are some of players' whole year stats. And this is only like game 5. He is dominant. He's probably definitely going to be a pro player, I think, in the future. Funny enough, his brother probably saw some of these stats and decided to kick it up against Tulsa, getting sacks, and I think even probably outperforming in that one game.
He had a pick 6 in that game as well, so they both were huge in that game for UC because Tulsa's kind of been a thorn for the Bearcats here the last couple of years, including almost ending UC's perfect season last year at Nippert Stadium, and the Pace brothers stepped up and were huge in UC's 10-point win at Tulsa.
I think it's also a testament to Luke Fickell's culture and recruiting. He knows how to develop players. Sauce Gardner, I think he was a 2-star, and he ends up being a 4th pick in the first round. He just really knows how to coach those players and get the best out of them.
Development's a great word. Yeah, that's exactly what Luke does really well, especially on the defensive side of the ball, considering his background at Ohio State as a player and as a defensive coach. But yes, you start talking about the TCU-Kansas game. I think people don't realize, they forget sometimes, those are going to be the opponents next year for the Bearcats and they move into the Big 12. And what a way for them to announce their arrival into the Big 12 would be with 3 consecutive American Conference championships. They've got 2 already on their belt, and they're going for 3 this year. And that winning streak in conference, to get everybody's best shot every week like UC does, and to win now 17 consecutive conference games. That's not easy. And again, that's a testament to Coach Fickell and the players, but I think definitely Coach Fickell and the culture that they've created at UC. This expectation of winning, this expectation that they're not just a top 25 team, they're a top 20 program now. And I think that'll manifest itself as they move to the Big 12.
There's one more matchup I want to talk about. Number 8, Tennessee at number 25, LSU. LSU hasn't been as good in the last few years with the downfall after losing, of course, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. But this is still a big game, especially at LSU.
Yeah, I think a big part of this game is going to be coaching. I know LSU hasn't been as good, but they have Brian Kelly. Say what you want about his playoff history. He's a good coach. He knows how to win. He's won at UC. He's won at Notre Dame. And I'm very curious to see how he gets that. I know he's an offensive-minded coach, but this is really going to be a defensive matchup. Tennessee is a high-octane offense, and they got to find a way to scheme to get in there. Tennessee's defense is a little weaker, but it doesn't matter when you can score 40 points a game. You don't need to stop your opponent from scoring.
Tennessee leads the country in yards per game, 559 yards a game, which is very impressive. And 365.8 of those yards are passing yards, so obviously you want to look towards the secondary and the pass rush and to see how that does.
Yeah, I think the secondary is a huge thing. Josh Heupel, who was from UCF, he likes to throw the ball. He's a very West Coast offense style one. So, I mean, if LSU secondary can't handle it, it's going to be a long day for LSU.
Upset alert. I like LSU for the reason you said, coaching. I think Brian Kelly wins this game with coaching. I think Tennessee is ripe to be upset. They got a good team. They got a good quarterback. Their quarterback, I think, should get more talk for the Heisman Trophy, considering the numbers he's put up and what he's done for Tennessee, having them as a top 10 team. But crazy things happen in the SEC on Saturdays, and I think playing at LSU, Brian Kelly. I'll go coaching in this one, LSU for the upset.
And LSU is one of the toughest atmospheres in college football. Before we wrap this one up, I just want to go over some of the other big matchups. I know South Carolina has struggled this season, but they play at number 13, Kentucky. Kentucky just fell to Ole Miss. They look to bounce back from that. Number 11, Utah versus number 18, UCLA, a battle of two of the top Pac-12 teams. And then the Red River rivalry, kind of a tongue twister, Texas versus Oklahoma, and then a local team, number 3 Ohio State versus Michigan State. This is it for college football, but we have some NFL games after this. You're listening to the NKU Sports Talk Radio Show.
Today we decided to walk to school. The light counted. 15, 14.
13?
We took a left on Carroll Street. Danny's smart, but he gets distracted. He realized he forgot his homework. I hope he doesn't have another bad day at school.
When you can see learning and attention issues from their side, you can be on their side. That's why there's Understood.org, a free resource for the parents of the 1 in 5 kids with learning and attention issues. Go from misunderstanding to Understood.org. Brought to you by Understood and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to The Cat Show. Up next, we have Nico. Nico is a member of the Shelter Pet Group.
That's right. A group known especially for their sunspot sleeping, ball chasing, leg rubbing, and of course, companionship. Just look how she struts.
It's like she owns the place.
And see how she curls up and cuddles her person.
The pitch on her purring is simply perfect.
Nice one.
Fantastic cat. But really the best way to know an amazing shelter pet like Nico is to meet one.
Visit theshelterpetproject.org today. Adopt.
Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
We're back on the NKU Sports Talk Radio Show. We're going to instantly head to one of the last games of the week, Sunday Night Football, Bengals versus Ravens in an AFC North matchup. Lamar Jackson is playing like one of the best QBs in the NFL right now, but the Bengals have the great defense, and when these two play, it's always a good one.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this game because not only is it a good test for the offensive line, which has been very hit or miss, but I'm curious to see how Lamar Jackson is able to play the ball because his wide receivers, they're kind of newish. I mean, before the season started, Mo Egger was talking about, who's Lamar going to throw to? And with the Bengals secondary being pretty strong, I think he's going to try and get out of the pocket, run the ball a lot. So I think the defensive line needs to get in there. This is where I think DJ Reader's injury is going to hurt. I talked about how Miami, they don't like to run the ball as much. But with Lamar Jackson, you never know when they're going to run the ball. So I would also like to see if Zach Taylor finally gets a little more creative with his plays. I think that's their biggest struggle. I know the offensive line has been weak, but you got to be more creative. You can't just run, pass, or chuck it to Lamar.
Yeah, let's not forget, last year the Bengals destroyed the Ravens, blew them out, embarrassed them at home, and when they played them in Cincinnati. So this is going to be a good game. One thing I've been focusing on with the Bengals, not so much the last 2 weeks because it's improved, but their O-line has improved so much since the first 2 weeks compared to the last 2 weeks. So it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on them. This Ravens defense is, I think, better than last year's Ravens defense, but it's Bengals-Ravens. Anything can happen. Big-time matchup.
I think the biggest difference is the Ravens team is healthy. Last year, they were playing third stringers, second stringers, and Joe Burrow throws 500 yards. That's not going to happen this time.
My question is the Bengals offensive line playing better, or are they playing worse opponents when it comes to defensive line? Because they faced TJ Watt, they faced Micah Parsons, and they got abused by those two. And now they played kind of anonymous defensive linemen in the last 2 games in the Jets and the Dolphins. The Dolphins actually have a pretty decent defense, but there was no superstar coming after you. To me, in this game, I think the human element is very important in this Bengals-Ravens game. You mentioned it. Bengals mashed the Ravens last year. They scored 82 points in 2 games against Baltimore. And the Bengals had a lot of fun talking about it. They had a lot of fun dancing in the end zone of the Ravens. Very proud organization. A lot of veteran guys who saw that and are mad about that, upset about that. I think the Ravens have had this game circled on their schedule since the end of last year as the team to go at the Bengals, because now as the defending AFC champions, once you put it out there and everybody sees all these stars and the fun, the gritty, and all that kind of stuff the Bengals are doing, like, man, we got to take these guys down a peg, right? And I think that's what Baltimore's coming with this game. Not just a healthy team this year that they didn't have last year when they played at Paul Brown Stadium, then Paul Brown Stadium, this is a team now who has a chip on its shoulder and wants a piece of the Bengals badly. Now, I think the matchup itself isn't bad for the Bengals because the Ravens don't have that superstar pass rusher. They've been vulnerable in the back end, even though they have really good corners, and Joe Burrow said it's probably the best corners they've faced all year. Bengals, I still like the matchup with Burrow and their receivers against that defense, but I think there's a human element to this thing, and I think the Ravens really want this game and really want to make a point against the Bengals. Can the Bengals match that kind of intensity in a game like this on Sunday Night Football? That, to me, is what I'm most curious about. I think this is the biggest challenge the Bengals have had all year so far, and I don't think it's close. I mean, look at the quarterbacks they faced. They faced nothing like Lamar Jackson. He's playing at an MVP level right now. Yeah. I don't think people realize. They said, oh, Lamar Jackson, all the running. He's got more touchdown passes than anybody in the league right now. Bateman's really started to develop. Mark Andrews obviously is a big-time target for them. I think this is a huge test for the Bengals, and I think for the first time we're really going to find out what the 2022 Bengals are about.
Well, would you call this a must-win?
Nope.
Nope.
Not a road game. Not a road game in division. And plus, the Bengals have kind of stabilized the season by winning the last 2, and they had the fortune of the entire division losing last Sunday. So if they lose this game and they fall a game behind the Ravens in Week 5, no, it's not a season ender. Certainly, you got to hold serve at home, considering you've already lost one division home game to Pittsburgh. But if they lose this game, so many things could still change. It's still early in the season. For me, I'm curious to see what they look like in this matchup, just against a team that wants to beat them as badly as the Ravens do.
I think they definitely have to match the energy. I think even with the Steelers, I'm sure they're like, oh, everyone says they're going to blow us out. We're nothing. And even though, they only scored like 23 points on 5 turnovers, TJ Watt was a monster. Mm-hmm. They wanted to hit their quarterback. But with, like you said, not having a star pass rusher with the Ravens, I think is a big thing. We saw that with Miami.
Yeah, and this is obviously a big game because all of these teams in the AFC North, they hate each other. The Browns and Bengals, they hate each other. Steelers and Browns hate each other. I mean, that's just how it goes. Probably one of the toughest, most physical divisions in the NFL, if not the most physical. I know we didn't get to a lot of games, but we did cover what is probably the biggest game of the week between the Bengals and the Ravens under the bright lights on Sunday Night Football. We'll have a little short segment updating you on NKU sports after this on the NKU Sports Talk Radio Show.
Only in the forest can you see this. And this. And this. But nothing beats the moment you see that.
Cool!
That's your child's eyes opening up to a world of possibilities.
I didn't know it could do that!
Because one trip to the forest can spark a world of difference.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org. Learn about forests near you and discover cool things to do when you go, like hiking, canoeing, fishing, or camping. Or create your own adventure with family and friends, and you might just see this. Your moment's out there. Find it at discovertheforest.org. That's discovertheforest.org.
Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
This is the NKU Sports Talk Radio Show. We're glad y'all could join us. I'm going to go over some of NKU, their fall sports, and what their schedules are looking like, and some of their most recent games. I'll start with men's soccer, who actually just played at number 17 Ohio State last night in Columbus, and stayed close with the Buckeyes until the very end, and Ohio State prevailed 3-2. And the men's soccer will be back in action at Detroit Mercy, a Horizon League opponent, on Saturday at 7 p.m. And just real quick, the women's soccer will play at Purdue Fort Wayne tonight at 7 p.m. and look to get their first win on the road. They're 0-3 so far against road opponents, and they will be back in action on Sunday against Youngstown State at 1 p.m. And that's just an update on some of NKU sports. I want to just thank you, Joe, for being on today. We really appreciate it, and you're a really big guest for us to have.
Well, hopefully they get bigger than me. Hopefully I was a helpful resource for you guys to have someone in here to bounce some ideas off of, and I hope I didn't take up too much of the time during the show talking about, the Bengals and the Bearcats, that kind of thing. But I really enjoyed talking about this kind of stuff, and you guys do a great job here. I'm really impressed with the setup and the passion, the energy you guys have for this side of the business and talking sports. It was a lot of fun, and I'm very much open. Anytime you want somebody to come in and fill in, just holler at me and I'll come back down.
Oh, it was a blast. I would definitely love you to come back at some point. It was absolutely blast.
You have some great insights and just some of the stories, because I know that's what all three of us are wanting to go into is sports. And so just some of the stories from someone who's been in the business as long as you have is great.
Somebody told me a long time ago I need to write a book about all of the things I've seen and heard inside locker rooms. Well, the problem is most of the stuff I can't actually print is what I've seen. There's a lot of great stories. Once we turn off these mics and that camera, I'll give you a couple.
And you mentioned our setup, and obviously the elephant in the room, which were one of our segments. Our NKU flag fell. Hey, but we have another on the other side, and we have a jersey, so we still got plenty of NKU gear in here, and it is in the name, so gotta show that off.
Yeah, and you'll realize too, even when you become a professional in this business, you still do a lot of things besides just perform, right? For me, as a one-man band, I shoot my own stuff, I write my own stuff, I edit my own stuff. It's sometimes setting up our studio with a look that I want as well. So even now, with the things you're doing that feel like, man, I have to do everything, I still have to do that, even though I do this on a professional level. So it feels like this is just kind of what we do. This is the business, We kind of one-man band our way through this, and I think it really does help prepare you to be able to see and do all sides of the business.
Yeah, in this business, there's a lot of things you don't know what you might have to do. You might have to just sweep the studio, or they might want you to set up stuff. There's always something that needs to be done, or something crazy can happen with live TV.
Make yourself as valuable as you can is the advice I always give people, by being able to do as much as you can. Don't limit yourself to just one discipline. Be open to doing new things. Make yourself valuable in a newsroom or a radio station or a broadcast team by being able to do a lot of different things. Volunteer for things. I can do this, I can do that. That way you become more valuable as part of whatever team you're on.
And there you go for everyone. For anyone that is listening that wants to go into that profession, you just heard it from a professional himself, one of the best, not just in the area but anywhere. And again, we appreciate having you on our show. And you mentioned about going higher, but it might be a peak. Who knows? It might be a peak.
I've always said, if this is where I retire and in 20 more years, all I have done is work for 40 years in Cincinnati, that's a hell of a career. I'll take that. Yeah, very proud of that.
Yeah, you can't ask for more. We are so glad you could join us. We thank you. We appreciate it. And that's about it. That's all we have for today's show. Stay tuned next week. We'll have a lot more. We'll have another guest, and you don't want to miss that. This has been the NKU Sports Talk Radio Show.